Mr. Jeon owns a holiday rental house in the suburbs of Seoul. His business is doing well, and with the companion of his best friend Chae, he gets to live a peaceful, mundane life. However, his life takes a sharp turn for the worse when he comes across a mysterious young woman struggling to drive out her car from a sticky mud. He helps her to drive the car out of the mud and also gives a few pointers and directions. The young woman is together with a small boy who appears to be her son. She thanks for his assistance and drives away with the boy. But Jeon is later shocked to see her at his rental house with her son. It turns out that she wants to rent the house for the weekend. As Chae, his best friend, shows her around the house, she notices the little boy playing around and sternly tells him to stop playing. Chae continues to show her around and even tells her about the swimming pool in the house. But she tells him that she's scared of water. So Chae goes to ask the little boy if he would like to play in the pool. The boy quickly takes a look at the woman, and after reading her expression, he agrees to play in the pool. Mr. Jeon also sits with the small boy and even helps him to fix his toy dog. Meanwhile, the mysterious woman goes shopping and weirdly picks items like a man's shorts and toy guns. As soon as she returns to the rental house, the little boy quickly hides the toy dog while the woman unpacks the bought goods from her bag. She first carries the bag with the gun toy and gives it to the little boy, so he runs out to play with it. Then she sees Mr. Jeon carrying a heavier bag and quickly runs to snatch it from him. He tries to invite her for a barbecue, but she turns down his invitation without remorse and tells him that she plans to prepare dinner for her son. As he leaves, she stops him and asks about the vinyl player in the room. So he takes her to the basement to show her the tons of records that his late wife had collected. She decides to pick one, and they test it in the vinyl player. Once she finds out that the vinyl works, she immediately walks over to the window side to watch her son as he plays with Chae in the pool. As Chae enjoys himself in the pool, it suddenly starts raining, so he begins to play with the little boy under the rain. Mr. Jeon sees them playing and goes to join in the fun. Afterward, he brings over a towel to help them clean themselves. While cleaning the little boy, he finds out that the boy's name is Si-hyun. After bonding for a while, he sends the boy away to meet his mother. That night, he and Chae enjoy a barbecue while drinking beer. While discussing, he tells Chae that his daughter will be coming back soon. They continue drinking till late in the night. The next morning, Mr. Jeon wakes up with a hangover, but decides to go shopping for groceries. While shopping, he receives a call from his daughter who informs him that she will be returning home with her boyfriend. He immediately agrees. While driving home, he notices Sunga's car by the side, and as he drives past her car, he sees her smoking beside the car. However, the little boy isn't with her. When he gets home, he searches around the rental house for the little boy, but he's nowhere to be found. He only sees an envelope of money on the table, which is her payment for renting his vacation house. He pockets the money and goes to turn off the vinyl player, but as he leaves, he notices some bloodstains on his fingers. So he goes to inspect the vinyl player. He notices that the record is stained with blood and immediately rushes out to find Sunga. It turns out that in the previous night, Sunga named Sunga had given the little boy a drugged meal as dinner. While eating, he calls her ma'am and asks about the whereabouts of his father. So she responds that he will meet his father after he finishes eating, which means that the little boy isn't her son. After killing the little boy, she uses her bloodied hands to turn on the vinyl player, and then she enters the bathroom to deal with his body. The next day, she quickly drives away from the rental house. Now in the present, Mr. Jeon almost hits a car while speeding to Sunga. The woman that he almost hit is Bo-min, a renowned detective. She notices the bloodstain on his hands and offers him a tissue to clean it. As she turns to leave, he spots a red siren light in her car and realizes that she's a police officer, so he immediately drives away. However, Detective Bo-min becomes suspicious of his evasive behavior. Mr. Jeon gets home and sees that Chae is still suffering from a hangover, so he hides the stained tissue and lies to Chae that the guests are still sleeping. Once Chae hears this, he decides to get into another round of sleep. Meanwhile, Mr. Jeon still feels bothered, so he enters into the rental house and inspects every corner. But all the rooms seem oddly clean. He finds this weird since most guests do not clean up their rooms before leaving. As he opens the bathroom door, he immediately chokes up, so he sniffs the place and realizes that it smells of bleach. He proceeds to inspect the bathroom sink and mirror, but everything is suspiciously clean. This makes him more confused, so he closely inspects the vinyl record again. However, Chae interrupts his inspection and criticizes him for lying that the guests are still around. Meanwhile, Detective Bo-min arrives at the station and begins to settle down in her new office. While driving, the officers discuss her accomplishments and how she had solved lots of technical murder cases. They began to wonder why she had decided to transfer to a small village. Meanwhile, Mr. Jeon eats breakfast with Chae and tells him that the mysterious young woman had cleaned up the room before leaving. But Che doesn't find this strange, and he even comments that most people have the habit of cleaning up their hotel rooms before leaving. However, Mr. Jian still thinks it's suspicious, so he steals the dashcam in Che's car, which was parked in front of the rental house. Then he reviews the videos from the dashcam. From the video, he sees Sunga struggling to put a huge box in the boot of her car. This makes him realize that the woman must have killed a little boy and put his body in the box. As soon as he comes to this realization, he immediately picks up his phone to call the police. But at the last minute, he changes his mind and wonders if he could be wrong. Then he rushes into the rental house and thoroughly cleans up the bathroom to remove the stench of bleach. He also removes all the mattress and takes it to the laundromat for cleaning. However, the laundromat notices that some towels are missing from his usual laundry package. So Mr. Jian rushes back to the rental house to search for the missing towel. After searching all the nooks and crannies, he eventually finds a towel that was used by the little boy. Suddenly, he hears the doorbell, so he throws the towel into a waste bin before going to answer it. The person at the door is Detective Bowman, so he invites her in. As she offers him her business card, she notices his shaky hand and grows suspicious. So she inquires if everything is alright. He contemplates on whether to reveal the truth but eventually decides to stay silent. After she leaves, he immediately goes to burn the towel and also cleans up the vinyl record before putting it back in the basement. Few months later, he resumes his happy, mundane life with his best friend Che. But every day, he often wakes up in the middle of the night and worries that Sunga or the police will suddenly knock at his door. After more months pass, he fully recovers from the trauma and even acknowledges that he can no longer remember Sunga's face. One day, Mr. Jian receives a call from his daughter who informs him that she's on her way to visit him. As he prepares for her arrival, a red Jeep suddenly stops in front of his house. So he thinks the driver is his daughter, but to his surprise, the driver is Sunga. She tells him that she wants to book his rental house for the night, but he lies to her that the house is unavailable for rent. At the same time, his daughter arrives with her boyfriend and overhears him telling Sunga to leave. She intercepts the conversation and volunteers to sleep the night at her boyfriend's house, while Sunga can stay at the rental house. That night, after a happy dinner, his daughter leaves with her boyfriend, so he's left to spend the night alone with Sunga. The next morning, as soon as he wakes up, he rushes into the rental house but finds it empty. He enters the bathroom and sniffs around, but it surprisingly doesn't smell like bleach. At this moment, she returns to the house and it turns out that she had gone out shopping. Later in the day, as he prepares the pool for her to swim, he asks her about the little boy that she had brought the last time, but she denies knowing the boy and even claims that it is her first time at the rental house. However, after days of living at the rental, she decides to prepare a meal and invites Mr. Jian. During the meal, she drops the pretense and admits that she was the one who had visited with the little boy. Once he hears this, he drops his guard and decides to eat the meal she had prepared. But after a while, he wakes up from unconsciousness and finds himself on the floor. He realizes that she had drugged his food and could have killed him while he was unconscious. Upon this realization, he begins to look for her around the house. When he doesn't find her, he immediately drives to the police station to report the case. As he meets the officer, he suddenly begins to bleed from the nose, so they offer him some tissue. At the same time, he notices a letter in his pocket and changes his mind about reporting the case. As he walks out, he bumps into Detective Bowman at the door. On his way home, he looks at the letter and realizes that it is a picture of his late wife and daughter. It turns out that Sunga had circled his daughter with red ink, which means that she is threatening to kill his daughter. So the next day, he visits his daughter at her workplace and watches her from afar to see if her life is in danger, but suddenly, he notices someone who looks like Sunga lurking around. He tries to take a closer look, but his daughter's boyfriend interrupts him. After spending some time with his daughter and her boyfriend, they escort him to his car and bid him goodbye. But at this moment, he sees Sunga standing across the road. So he begins to chase after her but almost gets hit by a car. Afterwards, he goes to visit his best friend Chai at the hospital. While eating dinner, he almost tells a friend that Sunga had killed a little boy. But his mind begins to imagine that after revealing it to his friend, Sunga will come and kill the friend. So he immediately changes the topic and asks his friend for Sunga's number, since it was the friend who took care of her booking. The friend texts the details to him, and according to the text, the woman had booked the rental house under the name of the little boy, and the phone number that she used to register for the rental isn't available. So Mr. Jian becomes frustrated that he knows nothing about her. Meanwhile, Sunga visits a flower garden and orders tons of flowers. Then she drives back to the rental with the flowers and invites Mr. Jian for a meal. Mr. Jian wants to know more about her. He accepts the invite but secretly searches through her belongings to find details like her name or phone number. When he finds nothing, he decides to steal her laptop. But unknown to him, the woman sees him leaving with her laptop. He immediately drives to a laptop repair store and tells them to unlock the password. But the repairman clarifies that the only way to unlock the laptop is to format it, and formatting will make him lose everything on the laptop. So he decides to take back the laptop. While returning home, he sees two trailer vehicles driving from the direction of his rental. So he rushes home and discovers that Sunga has filled the entire house with flowers and art pieces. She has completely redecorated the rental house, making it seem like her own house. That night, Mr. Jeon sneaks into her car to find more details about her, but he is shocked to discover some drugs which had been bought from his daughter's pharmacy store. This makes him realize that Sunga has been stalking his daughter. Few days after this, he sees some movers moving out some furniture from his rental house. According to them, the woman had instructed them to pack the furniture out. This makes Mr. Jeon angry, so he rushes into the house to look for the woman. She's at the pool swimming, so he gets into the pool and tries to drown her. Later that day, she asks him to return her laptop, so he gives it back to her. Then she tells him to ask her questions instead of snooping around her belongings. Upon hearing this, he reveals that he has a lot to ask her. So that night they sit together for dinner. She tastes the food first to prove that there are no drugs in it. Seeing this, he joins her in eating. They begin to discuss and he asks her about the little boy that she had come with. But she feigns ignorance, so he reveals that he has dashcam footage to prove that she had killed the little boy. However, the girl reveals that there isn't enough evidence to prove that she killed the boy. She also tells him that he is an accomplice to her crime since he didn't report the case to the police after discovering all the evidence. At the end, she tells him how much she loves his rental house and that she plans to visit every year. After the dinner, Mr. Jeon sits alone and replays the audio recording of her admitting to killing the boy. It turns out that he was recording their conversation. He reviews the dashcam footage again and packages it together with the audio tape. The next day, she sees him driving out and grows suspicious. As Mr. Jeon drives to the police station, he suddenly stops his car and remembers that he will become an accomplice if he reports the case to the police. Meanwhile, Sunga finds an audio device package and realizes that the man had recorded their conversation. So she immediately rushes out of the house. After contemplating for a while, Mr. Jeon decides not to report the case, but as he reverses his car to go home, the woman's red Jeep suddenly rams into him. Mr. Jeon suffers injuries from the crash, so he's taken to the hospital. While lying at the hospital bed, he sees Sunga roaming around the hospital in search of someone. So he arms himself with an IV pole and gets ready to hit her if she comes to look for him at his ward. But he almost hits a nurse, thinking it's Sunga. When he gets home, he sees her painting an artwork and acting like nothing has happened. So he asks her to return the dashcam footage and audio file that was inside his bag. She tells him that she had destroyed the two pieces of evidence. Upon hearing this, he gives up on reporting her and tells her to move out of his rental house. But she refuses and even asks him to be her friend. He rejects her proposal and storms off with the intention to make her move out by all means. The next day, while drawing a painting, she gets bored and begins to wait for Mr. Jeon. When she hears the sound of a car, she rushes out with happiness, but gets shocked to see that a family with kids are moving into the rental house. They call the police and show their booking details to verify that they booked the rental. So Sunga begins to panic and call Mr. Jeon, but his number is unavailable. Since she didn't have a receipt to prove that she was the first person to book the rental, she has no choice but to move her paintings and belongings to Mr. Jeon's house. Officer Kim helps in moving out her belongings and even tries to get closer to her, but her rude attitude pushes him away. The new family's children make her frustrated, so she spends the rest of the day trying to contact Mr. Jeon. After a few days, Mr. Jeon sends a laundryman to the rental house to get the house keys from the family guests who are checking out of the house. After the family returns the keys and leaves, Sunga tries to move back into the rental house, but the laundryman closes the door on her. It turns out Mr. Jeon had asked his friend for advice on how to make a stubborn guest move out. So the friend gives him the idea to make her frustrated. Another guest full of teenagers arrives at the rental, making her more frustrated. That night, as she tries to focus on her painting, the loud noise from their partying continues to distract her, and to top it off, one of the teenagers comes into her painting room and requests for a toothbrush from her. According to the kid, Mr. Jeon had told them to ask her for help if they needed anything. She obeys her request and goes to bring out some toothbrushes. But while giving it to the teenager, she rudely tells the girl to reduce the noise from their partying. The next day, she wakes up to the sound of her window breaking. When she goes to check it out, she finds out that the group of teenagers are responsible for it. She becomes angry and calls Mr. Jeon on the phone, but the man tells her to move out since more guests would be coming soon. she threatens to kill his daughter, but this threat no longer works on him, so her frustration swells up. She eventually decides to move out, but Officer Kim suddenly knocks at the door and walks in to check up on her. Upon seeing him, she gets an idea. The next day, Mr. Jeon gets a call from the tenant saying that Sunga has refused to give them the keys to the rental house, so he drives over to give them a spare key to the house. However, he finds out that Officer Kim is the one who had booked the rental house together with his friends, and Sunga intends to live together with them. That night, they party together in the pool, and the next day, Officer Kim drives off his friends and returns to live together with Sunga at the rental. But they find out that Mr. Jeon has also returned to the house. That night, as they eat dinner together, Officer Kim criticizes Mr. Jeon for acting rudely towards Sunga. It turns out that she told him a pity story of how Mr. Jeon had prevented her from living at the rental house. Later that night, she goes to meet Mr. Jeon at his house and proposes for him to let her continue living in the rental house. But he rejects her proposal and claims that he can never live with a murderer. Upon hearing this, she tells him that the rental house now belongs to her and that she will never leave. Mr. Jeon becomes angry at her words and chokes her before leaving. When the officer sees the man leaving, he goes to check up on Sunga and they end up making out in Mr. Jeon's bed. Mr. Jeon returns to the house and begins to beat up Officer Kim for making out with the woman on his bed. However, Kim responds by beating him up. They end up at the station and Detective Bowman begins to interrogate him. As he's about to tell her the truth about Sunga, she suddenly receives a call and goes out to answer it. When she returns, Mr. Jeon is no longer in the mood to tell her the truth. That night, Officer Kim returns to the rental house to check up on Sunga, but she isn't in the house. He mistakenly finds the bag containing the dashcam footage and audio tape of her admitting to killing the little boy. After watching the tapes, he immediately runs with the evidence in an attempt to report the case, but he comes across Sunga in her car. She begins to chase him and ends up hitting him. Afterward, she calls Mr. Jeon and he tells her that he has agreed to sell the rental house to her. However, he begs her to give him a few days to sort some things out. Upon hearing this, Sunga decides to travel to Seoul. When she gets out of her car, she notices the mud stain on her car that she got from hitting Officer Kim. But she ignores it and happily enters into her art gallery expecting to see the display of her artwork. Instead, she sees someone else's work on display. She becomes angry and begins to hit her manager for not displaying her work. At this moment, her father calls and tells that he was the one who gave the instruction for her artwork to be removed from the gallery. According to him, her works were not up to the standard of being displayed at a gallery. As soon as she hears this, she orders the staff at the gallery to throw out the displayed artworks so that she can replace it with her own art piece. Then she gets into her car to return to the rental house, but the passenger seat suddenly opens and a strange man enters her car and begins to talk to her in a familiar tone. It turns out that he's the father of the little boy that she had murdered. She invites him to her art display event at the gallery and tells him that her art pieces were inspired by the death of the little boy. After saying this, she gets out of the car and begins to walk away, but he chases after her and hits her head on the wall. She tries to run away from him again, but he catches her and hits her several times. She becomes angry at this and lashes out at him, but he responds by asking why she had killed his son. It turns out that the both of them used to be in a relationship, but she was unhappy in the relationship since he had a son. According to her, he cared more for the little boy than her. She also reveals that she felt suffocated having to pretend that she loved the little boy while they were dating, so she got rid of him in order to get all his love and attention. The man is shocked to hear this, so she uses this opportunity to run and press the parking lot alarm for help. She also uses a fire extinguisher to hit the man, but he immediately gets on his feet and pulls out another extinguisher. He chases her with it, and when he sees her trying to seek safety in a room, he decides to throw the extinguisher at her. This knocks her off and she becomes unconscious. At this time, people begin to gather at the parking lot, so he escapes to avoid getting arrested. Sunga wakes up at the hospital in a bloody dress and immediately drives to the gallery opening event. But she notices that her artworks have been dumped in the trash. Meanwhile, the gallery is filled with people admiring the artwork that she had ordered the staff to throw away. The manager meets Sunga's father and they happily discuss the successful gallery event. Suddenly, Sunga rams a truck into the gallery and destroys tons of artwork. Then she steps down from the truck and walks out to meet her father. She tells him that the little boy's father is after her life and that she wants her father to deal with him. After saying this, she leaves the gallery with everyone watching her. Meanwhile, the laundryman enters his shop and is shocked to see a bloodied white shirt on his ceiling. When he reviews his security footage, he discovers that Sunga is the culprit. She had done it as revenge for him ignoring her when he delivered laundry to the rental house. The next day, Chai gets discharged from the hospital and immediately goes to visit Mr. Jeon at the rental house. Since his friend isn't around, he goes to inspect the rental house and sees Sunga. She invites him into the house. So he calls his friend's daughter and tells her that he couldn't find her father at the rental. The daughter tries to call her father, but his phone number is unavailable. Meanwhile, Chai remembers that Mr. Jeon had told him about a guest who is refusing to move out, so he suspects the guest to be Sunga. He begins to question her on how long she has stayed at the rental house, so she reveals that it has been over a month. She also tells him that Mr. Jeon had agreed to sell the rental house to her, but Chai doesn't believe this. So he tells her that his friend will never sell the place to her. He also tells her to move out and threatens to call the police on her. As he leaves the rental house, she removes a screwdriver from a drawer and rushes towards him. Then she jumps on him and stabs the screwdriver into his neck. When he falls on the floor, she picks up his crutches and hits him severely with it. Then she happily runs into a supermarket and buys gallons of bleach and other tools in order to dismember Che. Detective Bowman sees her making all the purchases and becomes suspicious. So she stalks Sunga and even secretly follows her to a cornfield. Meanwhile, Mr. Jeon's daughter is still worried about her father since his number is still unavailable. So she excuses herself from work and drives to the rental house. She looks around the house for her father and even calls his name, but she doesn't find anyone. Luckily, Che wakes up from being tied up. He begins to hit a table to grab her attention. So, as she is about to leave, she hears a sound from the house and goes to check it out. But she comes across Sunga, who tries to sneak up on her from behind. Sunga invites her in for a drink, so she takes a sip and tries to call her father again. But the number is still unreachable, so Sunga comments that her father must have died by falling into a ditch. Upon hearing this, the daughter becomes angry and squeezes Sunga's hand. Due to the squeeze, Sunga decides to tell the truth to the daughter. She takes a seat and tells the daughter that Mr. Jeon had helped in covering up the murder of a little boy. After confessing all her crimes to the daughter, she commands the girl to continue calling Mr. Jeon until he picks the call. But instead of getting scared, the daughter begins to laugh and advises Sunga to take medication for mental illness. Sunga ignores this command and stands to leave, but the daughter pulls her hair from behind and hits it on a table. Then she goes to sit down again and tells Sunga that they will have to wait together until her father comes back. At this moment, Sunga reveals that the drink she gave to the daughter was drugged. Upon hearing this, the daughter immediately runs out of the house. Sunga tries to chase her but stops halfway and turns back to pick up a kitchen knife. As she dashes out the house with the knife, the daughter suddenly hits her with a chair, making her wince in pain. Then the daughter uses this opportunity to untie the injured Chai, but Sunga comes to attack again and they both get into a fight with the daughter overpowering Sunga. However, the daughter begins to get dizzy from the drug, so Sunga stabs her with a kitchen knife and also chokes her with some cords. Afterwards, she drags out a big luggage containing the daughter's body and puts it into her car. Coincidentally, Mr. Jeon calls his daughter, so Sunga answers the call. This makes Mr. Jeon realize that Sunga has held his daughter captive, so he goes with a gun to save his daughter. He arrives at the rental house with the gun and begins to search for his daughter, but he finds Sunga by the pool and threatens to shoot her. However, she isn't scared. She reveals that his daughter will die if he kills her, so the man lowers the gun. Seeing this, she directs him to search in the basement. He gets to the basement and sees Che in a pool of blood, so he immediately takes him to the hospital. While going out of the hospital, he sees the laundryman and instructs him to take care of Che. But when the laundryman sees Che's critical medical condition, he decides to call the police. Meanwhile, Mr. Jeon drives back to the rental house in anger. When he meets Sunga and tries to attack her, she suddenly pulls out a plane ticket and reveals that she plans to travel abroad. Then she offers to show him where she had hid his daughter. As she makes his proposal, Mr. Jeon's phone suddenly rings and the caller is Detective Bowman. Seeing this, he threatens to reveal all her crimes to the police, which makes her become nervous. But he eventually ends the call and tells her to continue with the proposal. So she continues with her offer and tells him that the only way she'll ever leave him is if he helps her to get rid of a body, and if he tells all her victims to stay silent and not report the case to the police. As he contemplates on whether to accept her proposal, the detective calls again, but he immediately ends the call and accepts her proposal. So they drive to a lakeside and she shows him the big luggage containing his daughter's body. Mr. Jeon forces her to open the luggage, but when she opens it, she discovers that the daughter is no longer inside the bag. As she contemplates on what to do, the police suddenly surround her. It turns out that after the laundryman had called Detective Bowman to inform her about the assault on Che, she immediately rushes to block Mr. Jeon as he angrily drives to his rental house. She comes with a plan and tells him that she will look for his daughter while he delays Sunga to stay longer until she is caught. So he follows the plan and tries to delay Sunga by making her talk about the proposal. At the same time, Detective Bowman looks through all the CCTV camera in the town to find where Sunga had hidden the daughter. According to Detective Bowman, if she calls him 2 times, it means that they have found his daughter. So as soon as he sees the second call, he realizes that his daughter is safe. So he accepts Sunga's proposal and lures her to the lakeside for the police to ambush and catch her. As soon as Sunga is arrested by the police, Mr. Jeon rushes to check up on his daughter, who had been taken to the hospital. Although she lost a lot of blood, the doctors reassures him that his daughter will survive. Detective Bowman comes to visit Mr. Jeon at the hospital, and as she leaves, he remembers that Sunga was planning to get rid of the body of someone she had killed. So he runs to inform the detective about this. Unknown to them, someone has sneaked into the rental house and picks up the gun that Mr. Jeon had dropped. At the police station, Detective Bowman begins to interrogate Sunga, but she remains silent. So the detective brings up the case of the dead body that she wanted to get rid of. As soon as Sunga hears this, she breaks her silence because she was thinking that the police will only charge her with assault. Detective Bowman suspects that Sunga had hidden the dead body in a cornfield. So she takes permission from her boss to search the entire cornfield. Meanwhile, Sunga's lawyers arrive at the police station and bail her out. As soon as she's released, she orders her lawyers to sue Detective Bowman. Afterwards, she drives over to the laundryman's shop and sets the place ablaze. Meanwhile, Mr. Jeon learns that the girl has been released. So he rushes to the rental house to stop her from getting her flight tickets, which she forgot at the house. On the other hand, Detective Bowman and her search crew began to search the entire cornfield to find the dead body that Sunga was trying to get rid of. One of the officers finds a dismembered body and immediately calls the attention of other police officers. As they get a closer look at the dead body, they realize that it belongs to Officer Kim. It turns out that Sunga had hit him with her car and abandoned his body in the cornfield. After setting the laundry shop on fire, Sunga hurries to the rental place to get her plane tickets, but suddenly, the little boy's father comes out of a corner pointing a gun at her. According to him, her father had sent him to kill her off. Sunga doesn't believe this and tries to attack him, so he hits her with the gun. However, she's still in disbelief that her father would betray her, so she decides to call her father, but the father is looking through her laptop and sees a photo that she had taken after killing the little boy. He picks up her call but refuses to answer her questions, so she becomes frustrated and confesses to the boy's father that she had actually killed the little boy. At this moment, Mr. Jeon walks into the rental house and overhears this confession. When she sees this, she reveals to the little boy's father that Mr. Jeon is also an accomplice in her crime. Upon hearing this, the boy's father shoots Mr. Jeon in the arm and also shoots Sunga in the abdomen. As he tries to kill Sunga, Detective Bowman arrives at the house and shoots him on the leg. When Sunga sees this situation, she tries to run away, but the boy's father chases after her and shoots her from behind, making her fall. However, she's determined to escape, so she stands up to run again. But he ends up shooting her on the face. This leads her to fall into the pool, and the clear pool water immediately turns bloody. She ends up dying. Her killer gets arrested and jailed, but her father sends some lawyers to defend him in court. As for Mr. Jeon, he lives happily ever after with his daughter and best friend Che.